to drive your career, not just ride along? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm Simone E. Morris, your host and career strategist, here to give you the roadmap. Each week, we're cutting through the noise with strategies, stories, and insights to get you back in control. Your career clarity starts right here. Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone E. Morris, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Elizabeth Lotardo. Elizabeth is a dynamic consultant, writer, and training creator who helps organizations drive emotional engagement. She's worked with leaders at every level in over 150 companies, including names like Salesforce and Hilton, designing programs that empower everyone to find more purpose at work. A wildly popular LinkedIn learning instructor with millions of views, Elizabeth is also a contributor to Harvard Business Review and has been featured in the Wall Street Journal and on NPR. She's the author of the new book, Leading Yourself, and co-author of Selling with Noble Purpose. Get ready for an insightful conversation about taking charge of your career with the amazing Elizabeth Lotardo. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited. I'm excited about your book, your bio. I've shared your bio with our audience, but you, in your own words, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're currently doing.
Well, wearer of many hats, if you read my bio. So currently, I'm an online instructor for LinkedIn Learning. I create a lot of courses for them. I'm an author of the new book, Leading Yourself. I also write for HBR and Fast Company, and I'm a consultant on employee engagement from the employee point of view, not the manager point of view.
Oh, I love that. I'm the audience, I'm doing a heart. Okay. I love that. All right. So you've got a lot of experience in careers. This show is about being in the driver's seat for your career and being strategic and intentional and really owning your career from your perspective. Well, wait a minute. Let's backtrack. How did you get to the driver's seat? Or
Um,
how
I'm
and when?
only newly in the driver's seat. So, and I think the
Okay.
same is true for a lot of us. To say, like, I'm fully in the driver's seat when all of us are subject to external variables, to technology, to other people saying yes or no, it
Yep.
feels kind of cautious, even for me. But as I've moved through my career, the more I've been able to own my power and control the controllable, the more doors open for me.
So how do you get to own your power? Because you at a certain point you have to start amplifying and owning your voice. How do you own your power in your definition?
So it was a slow build for me, and then it happened really fast.
Hmm.
So I started out in advertising, which is all about communication, and I was client manager, which is a delicate role, dealing with creatives and a lot of money. And I always took pride in the fact that I could keep things really level. And what I didn't recognize was I was doing that often at my own expense of not speaking up, of not putting my ideas forward, of pleasing everyone around me. But I wasn't deeply unhappy. And then in 2022, I had a baby. And much like the episode I just listened to of yours, motherhood really changes you.
Yes.
And it changes the way you look at ambition, it changes the way you look at your career, and it changes the way you look at yourself. And in that experience, I had some pretty severe health complications that were a big surprise to everybody. Um, and I was faced with mortality in a way I did not expect at age 29. And in that experience and in the processing of it, I read this book called The Five Regrets of Dying. It was written by a woman who was a hospice nurse. And she summarized the biggest regrets people had. And the number one was, I wish I had the courage to live life as my authentic self instead of what others expected of me. And that hit me really deeply because I had in the first decade of my career this slow build of struggling to find my voice, of struggling to recognize my power and make my desires known. And then in this pivotal moment of my life, I shifted and made a deeper commitment to making bigger plays, to being less afraid, and to living more authentically. And I wish I did it a decade earlier, but better late than never. So, back to your question of what puts you in the driver's seat of your career, you can slowly start to recognize that there is one, but sometimes it takes a big moment to catapult you in.
Yes, man, I received that because I know that my life and my career changed almost 10 years ago when I had my daughter. So I received that. And again, another heart going out because that is a powerful, it's almost like a rebirth of who you are from an identity standpoint when you have a child, or at least that's what it felt like for me. So I totally receive what you're saying. So many gems that you put in there, Elizabeth. So now you're in the driver's seat, and have you landed on your formula for owning your career? What are the key ingredients?
I'll tell you three things that have really helped me.
Okay.
The first is to let go of a lot of expectations.
Mm,
Because when we tether ourselves too deeply to expectations, we miss good opportunities that we just didn't expect.
mm,
The second thing that has helped me is to find opportunity in the face of an unexpected event or a frustration.
mm,
And to train my brain, and the brain hack I used, I learned from this woman named Tessa Romero, is the phraseology of this is my chance. So if you are met with an unexpected situation, your boss rewrote the project roadmap, you're annoyed because all the things you were working on don't matter anymore. When you can force your brain to say, this is my chance to insert opportunity to zoom in on how this maybe could be good for you, your momentum changes. So letting go of expectations, forcing the opportunity, and then lastly, recognizing that it's a long game. I
mm.
think I, like everyone now, see instant success on social media and no one posts about all the rejections. And to see someone thriving, you don't get the backstory. So to constantly remind myself that it's a highlight reel, my own social media included, and it really is a long game, and to not compare yourself to people 10, 15, 20 years ahead of you.
Yeah, there's a lot of unlearning required because you pick up these things and you learn how to compare yourself to other people. I sometimes have to catch my daughter and like don't do this, and I'm doing the comparison thing. So what have you had to unlearn in order to grow and thrive in your career?
Ooh, we're getting deep really fast. Well, probably similar to what we have both, I'm sure, had to unlearn as women, and what you're trying to institutionalize in your daughter, this, put yourself on the back burner mentality that is quite cultural. I've had to unlearn the emphasis on success being really linear. I think that is taught in public school and in university, that you go into your career at this entry level job, and then you get a senior role, and then you get a director role, and then you're a vice president, and then you're a CEO. And
Yeah.
it works like that almost 0% of the
Yes.
time for anyone. Um,
Yes, that's true.
but it's tough because these beliefs are often so seated in us. It's like such a deep groove in the soil, like it just pulls you right back in. And to recognize them is the first step. But I'm on the journey of rewiring, just like every other adult is.
I love that. I love that. And so where does risk fit into the equation? Because certainly to do the rewiring and to show up and not have those regrets that you talked about earlier, you've got to take some risks in your career. So talk to us about that.
I am such a risk averse person naturally. Like I had all my money in a checking account way too long. Like it's
Have a
embarrassing
money
to
mark.
talk about. Um, but I had to reckon with it because I could see evidence that my risk aversion was holding me back from making bigger plays. And what really shifted things for me was in that health experience, the thought of failing was less scary than the thought of not knowing, of
Mm,
what if I went for it? What if it had worked out? What if I really tried and bet on myself in a big way? What would have happened?
mm,
That was so much more uncomfortable than the thought of failing.
mm.
And we often don't lean into that discomfort, but when you really sit with it, sometimes it can give you the courage you need.
Yes, yes. You said two things that resonated with me. In fact, listeners, if you've read my book, The 52 Tips for Owning Your Career, one of the tips is bet on yourself. So I was smiling when you were saying that, Elizabeth. I really appreciate that. And we have to be the biggest betters on ourselves, because how can we expect other people to invest in us if we don't invest in ourselves fully? I appreciate that very much. I it, I forgot the second thing that I was going to say. So let me move ahead with the conversation. I want to read this phrase that, or this quote from you that I thought was pretty powerful. And for those listeners who are looking for work, because I just saw, I believe it was PwC who laid off 1,500 people. There's a lot of layoffs and restructuring going on right now. So I want to encourage my listeners not to just be in the passenger seat waiting for things to happen to them. And you have a pretty powerful quote that I want to read and then get your additional context or comments on. You say in your book, no matter where you are, things probably aren't perfect right now. Maybe parts of your job suck. I've been there. Or your boss doesn't listen, or your industry is a little behind, which could be with all this AI stuff. Maybe this isn't your dream job. Your coworkers aren't your best friends, and you don't see a clear path to anything beyond Friday. Maybe things are actually pretty good, but you can't shake the gnawing feeling that they could be better. Elizabeth, over to you to continue with that thought.
That was the one of the opening lines of my book, and I finished it with this book will meet you where you are.
Mm,
And what I hope to capture in that language is we all have a huge variety of work experiences, and none of them are perfect. Have
mm,
you seen that graphic on LinkedIn? It goes around viral every few months. I think it's called Ikigai, where all the circles come together, like what you do combines with what you love, combines with what the world needs, combines with what you're paid for, and there's this magic center point that is your perfect career. Um, I hate that graphic because I think it sets so many of us up for a completely unattainable bar. To believe that work should be this source of the unlimited emotional fulfillment and fill our cup in every way and be so profitable and perfect and united, like it is an insane bar, and it almost never is. But we have the power as individuals to lower the bar to a point of realism and to change the experience and bring it upward instead of hoping that we find the perfect experience somewhere else. So, in the book, that is the sentiment I hope to deliver is yes, right now is not perfect. Every single job has parts that are really challenging, some more than others. But inside of that, you are never powerless and you can forge a different path without making a leap.
mm. I love that. It feels like the driver's seat to me, which I wish that I knew when I was in corporate America. And I remembered my other thought when you were talking earlier, Elizabeth, and that is you were talking about being uncomfortable. I also equate to that. I use the language of dance with discomfort. Learn
Mhm.
to dance with discomfort as you amplify and own your power and show up authentically, which brings me to a conversation, listeners, that Elizabeth and I were having before we got onto the interview, which is about authenticity at work. So I want to get into it because I think that we can get challenged with showing up authentically. Some of us are invited to bring your authentic self to work, but then we test it out and we see not so fast. So talk to us about authenticity and some tips around how you can use your authentic voice and show up at work.
It is such a complex conversation, and you and I scratch the surface of it, and we'll only scratch the surface of it here. But what I think is important to recognize is that authenticity is a privilege, and it's a privilege that not everybody has. And this narrative of be yourself at work, bring all of you, is generally the loudest from straight white men who are over 40 because that is the group who paid no price for
Mm,
bringing their authentic self to
mm,
work. So before we sunshine and roses all over this, we're all free to be you and me conversation, let's recognize that some groups of the workforce, groups beyond me, have paid steeper prices for authenticity.
Mm.
So to suggest a different narrative is to, in some ways, invalidate that that happened, that authenticity wasn't actually allowed the way we said it was, and to unpack some of the reasons why, so that now authenticity can be accepted. And it has to be deeper than, oh, be your authentic self.
Mm.
Um, for me, I'm a woman, but I am white, and I've thought about authenticity a lot. I'm also heavily tattooed, which is something that I only had the courage to do later. But one thing that helped me with authenticity and like trying to claim my own voice is I was working with this business coach who knew I had a lot of tattoos. I didn't show them very much. And she said, "Oh, well, what if someone doesn't reach out to you because you have tattoos and they think you're unprofessional?" And the fear part of me was like, "Oh my gosh, what if you're right? Like tons of old people think that." Um, but then I grounded myself and I thought, okay, if someone looks at my body of work, if someone looks at all of my client results and all of the things I've published and the experiences I have, and they decide that they don't want to reach out to me because my tattoos are unprofessional,
Mm.
I'm probably better off.
Yeah.
You can see yourself out of my inbox. That can be, sort of a barrier to entry, keeping the judgmental, I don't know how you feel about profanity, a-holes away from me. Um, so there's privilege in being able to do that. Having said that, the authenticity conversation changes when each of us change, recognizing that the workplace hasn't really allowed it and we need to unpack why so we can. And also, when we don't change, nothing changes. So the courage to show up as yourself, even though there are some risks, I think is valid.
Mm. Oh, we're gonna be friends for a long time, Elizabeth. I mean,
We are like minds, Simone. But this conversation is kind of swirly, and if you're listening to it, you're like, "Oh, that's kind of a lot to unpack," because these things are a lot. They're
yeah.
complex, they're interconnected.
Yeah. I talk about tattoos when I do training on unconscious bias, dare I say the language today. Uh, but the tattoos is still a thing. We're still talking about inclusion
Yeah.
in 2025. We haven't figured out the Rubik's Cube and to get all the colors to line up. So authenticity is a thing. And it took me a very long time to be authentic. I was taught not to wear my hair a certain way. And so there was the straightening of the hair, and then I thought twice about the braids, and I found myself post 2020 twisting my natural hair. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to show up authentically. And you and I, Elizabeth, we're also talking about LinkedIn because there's a lot of us who stand on the outside of LinkedIn and we filter, filter, filter. And I have clients that I coach who are like, yeah, I just follow people. I just comment on other people's stuff, but I don't say anything. There's that fear of judgment and fear of what people will think at work or even other people will think about your comments. Can you talk about your experience? Because you're on LinkedIn, you're LinkedIn famous.
I'm like B-list LinkedIn famous. But there's a lot in what you said that it rings completely valid to me as both a content creator for LinkedIn and a consumer of LinkedIn, just
Mhm.
as a person. Um, like any social media, LinkedIn is a highlight reel, but the risk of being perceived is so much more because it's connected to our professional identity instead of just like, I like recipes. I disagree with your workout routine. The risk is heightened. What I've seen on LinkedIn play out in terms of people being unwilling to engage with it and just consume it is, I think, rooted in that risk. And I'll give you an example. I did this LinkedIn Live on how to work for a micromanager. It had 50,000 views
Wow.
and 3 likes
Nice.
because no one wants to admit
Yeah.
that they're attending and watching and trying
Yeah.
to figure out how to work for a micromanager. So some of it is that dynamic. And to me, the risk is not, oh, I don't put any original thought. I only comment on other people's things. That's fine. But do something. And you don't have to do it in this big controversial way. But showing that you're an active participant in conversations and you have things to add, even if it's not like lengthy articles or really clicky videos, can be valuable in building your professional network in ways that you can't always draw a straight line to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you with the like thing because I have shown up on LinkedIn and I get direct messages or things behind the scene, or I get people commenting with me if I go out and do a speaking engagement. Someone will say something to me that, oh, I saw your post, but they don't engage. So I'll tell my clients, don't worry about those 3 likes that you brought up. So that's a very good point. And by the way, a hot topic that it would be great to link that in the show notes as well.
Well, if you're listening, you can give Simone and I some likes because we're obviously out here with a lot of views, but not a lot of engagement. And that's because engagement in any platform, but especially LinkedIn, feels a little bit risky. Like you have to 100% agree with what you liked, or you have to vet the person to make sure they've never said anything bad before you like one of their posts. So I can definitely recognize the professional risk that comes with a platform like that.
Yeah. Can you give our listeners some tips on helping your career on LinkedIn?
So, being actively engaged in the content on LinkedIn is the biggest tip I can offer. You can make your profile absolutely perfect, but if no one finds it, the algorithm will not serve you. So,
Mm,
the more you are, even if you're just liking, passive likes, interesting thought, great post, like no real meat there, that still helps you. And that can be your bridge to engaging more effectively. Because if you make this static thing that is LinkedIn and treat it like a resume, like, oh, here it is, it's done, your resume will fall to the bottom of the algorithm pile, so to
yep.
speak.
Yep. Totally understand that. And thank you for sharing your insights there. When you think about resources that have helped you to level up in your career, can you share any of those with our listeners? Whether it's a book, podcast, or a class that you took, what's been helpful?
I read a lot. And I have a huge variety of interests. Like my bookshelf is categorized. Like I have motherhood over here and cooking and interior design and
Oh,
sales.
I need you at my house. I have
Um,
many bookshelves. Oh, I need you to come over.
But, well, like me, you probably have a huge variety of interest. And for so long, I thought that that was really like bad somehow. Like I should pick a lane and just be focused and not have all these tangents. And then I read this book by David Epstein called Range. And the subtitle is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World.
Mm,
And what he studied is that people who had made it to the top of a profession had a background that was almost always really seemingly random, like huge variety in their background. They didn't follow a linear path
mm.
of entry level to junior to senior to director to VP to CEO. They did a lot of things and they didn't always seem related. And the extrapolation of his research was we learn different things in different areas and we take it with us. And being a more well rounded person is more valuable than being a really, really deep specialist. Even more so true now with the advent of AI.
Yes.
And that book gave me permission to just accept that I'm a multifaceted being. I know that sounds ridiculous, but embrace how much I've learned from parenting that I've brought into my work as a consultant. How much interior design knowledge and studying that has impacted the way I brand my business and my
Mm.
materials. So recognizing that there's not always a straight line, but there is value in this messy hairball. And oftentimes it is the messy hairball that ends up being the most powerful.
Yeah, and you don't sound ridiculous talking about being multifaceted. I can remember when I started my business and people would give me the guidance of niche down. People don't want to be confused, but it's like, yes, but I'm not just one thing. And it takes a while to be able to embrace your unique differences, your value proposition, because if you listen to other people and not trust your inner compass or your wisdom, then you can be off track and you'll get signals that you're off track. So I love what you're saying that this book gave you permission. I love that so much. Well, what else would you like to share with our listeners before we wrap up today's episode?
Well, we're sitting here in a turbulent time, to
Mm,
use an overused phrase. And I think all of us, you and me included, are feeling some degree of unrest and uncertainty and cautiousness about the future.
yeah.
And that has happened before, typically in like small pockets, like communities, families. But now
Mhm.
it's happening on a global scale, where we're all kind of holding our breath, wondering how is this whole thing gonna shake out? And to me, peace doesn't come in necessarily believing that it's all going to be fine and it's going to be great and there's no problems. Like, I cannot toxic positivity myself into truly believing that.
Mm,
For me, empowerment comes with recognizing it's going to be hard and it's going to be challenging and it's not going to be what I expect, but I'm going to figure it out anyway. And the
mm,
more we can shift from away from hope that it's going to somehow work out for me in the hands of this universe that I don't control into, okay, this is tough, but I'm in my driver's seat, to use your phraseology, and I'm going to figure it out. That's when like our strategic thinking, our problem solving, our creativity really starts to ignite. Crossing your fingers that it's going to work out for you is disempowering, but believing that you can make it work out is when the magic starts to happen.
mm. What a great way to end this episode. I love that so much. Figure it out. I'm trying to think of someone I know says uh, a, a, a twist on figure it out. But yeah, you have to trust yourself to be able to figure it out. And I love the not waiting for magic to happen, but going forth and taking bold action to cause the magic to happen. Elizabeth, it was a pleasure to have you on today's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'd love for you to tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you if they'd like to do so.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot. Elizabeth Lotardo. I also have a lot of courses on there, but most of my content is free.
Oh, that's very generous. And we'll be sure to put the book. Tell us the book title again, please.
The book title is Leading Yourself, and the subtitle is Find Joy, Meaning, and Opportunities in the Job You Already Have, despite imperfect bosses, lethargic coworkers, annoying systems, and too many deliverables.
I can already think of one or two people I want to get that book for. An awesome, awesome title. Thank you again so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
That's it for today's empowering episode. I'm Simone E. Morris, and I want you to remember that you are indeed the architect of your career. Share this episode if it sparked something in you. Subscribe wherever you listen, and find more resources at SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org. Keep practicing career ownership, and I'll be right here with you next week for more transformation.